You've been told your whole life that governments keep secrets. You probably assumed those secrets were about weapons programs, diplomatic back channels, or intelligence operations too sensitive to share. You were not wrong, but there is a category of secret that is different from all of those. A category where the secret is not what the government did. The secret is what the government saw and could not explain. And that part, the part where the most powerful institutions on Earth encountered something and admitted they had no answer, is the part that never made the history books. But the real story is far stranger. Start with a date, December 16, 2017. The New York Times publishes a story that most people read, filed away, and moved on from. The headline announced that the United States government had been running a secret program to investigate unidentified aerial phenomena. It had a budget of $22 million. It had been running for years. It had been classified. And it had documented encounters with objects that demonstrated, in the words of the program's own investigators, flight characteristics that no known aircraft could replicate. This was not a rumor. This was not a conspiracy blog. This was official, documented, acknowledged. And the question it raised was one that no spokesperson, no press secretary, and no government briefing has ever fully answered. What exactly did they see? To understand why that question matters, you need to go back further. Not years, decades. Because the pattern of official acknowledgement followed by official silence is not new. It is, in fact, one of the most consistent threads running through the last 80 years of documented government records. In 1947, the United States Army Air Forces launched a formal investigation into a wave of aerial sightings reported by civilian pilots, military personnel, and trained observers across the continental United States. The project was called SIGN. It was followed by Project Grusch. Then came Project Blue Book, which ran from 1952 to 1969 and investigated more than 12,000 reported sightings. The official conclusion, when Blue Book was closed, was that the vast majority of cases had conventional explanations. But the word vast is doing enormous work in that sentence. Because the final report contains 701 cases that investigators could not explain. 701 documented incidents reviewed by professional military analysts that produced no satisfactory answer. Those cases were not declassified as hoaxes. They were not classified as weather balloons or misidentified aircraft. They were closed as unknowns, and then the program ended. What does an unknown mean exactly? When the people drawing that conclusion are trained observers with access to radar data, flight records, and the full investigative resources of the United States Air Force, it means something was there, something was observed, something was tracked, and no one, with all the tools available to them, could determine what it was. That is not nothing. That is a 700-item catalog of documented events that official science has never revisited, never resolved, and largely never discussed. The historian and sociologist Dr. Diana Pasulka, whose research at the University of North Carolina examines the cultural and institutional dimensions of UAP documentation, has argued that the most significant aspect of these programs is not what they discovered, but what they reveal about the limits of institutional knowledge. When an official government body concludes that something cannot be explained, that conclusion carries a very different weight than a civilian report. It means the tools failed. It means the frameworks failed. It means something was observed that did not conform to what was expected to exist. And then the 2017 disclosure opened a door that had been sealed for nearly 50 years. Because what followed was not just the revelation of a secret program. What followed was a series of authenticated sensor recordings released by the United States Department of Defense. Footage captured by Navy F-88 fighter jets, equipped with advanced infrared targeting systems. 3 videos, now officially declassified and confirmed as genuine by the Pentagon. 3 videos showing objects exhibiting flight behavior that challenged everything those pilots had spent careers learning about how aircraft move through the atmosphere. The pilots who recorded these encounters did not describe seeing lights in the distance. They described close-range visual contacts with objects that appeared to defy aerodynamic logic. Commander David Fravor, a decorated Navy pilot with 18 years of experience, encountered one of these objects over the Pacific Ocean in 2004. He described a craft approximately 40 feet long, with no wings, no exhaust plumes, no visible means of propulsion, hovering at low altitude, before accelerating away at a speed his instruments could not track. He reported it. The report was documented. The encounter was investigated, and then it was classified for over a decade. The object was never identified. What makes these modern cases difficult to dismiss is the sensor architecture surrounding them. A single eyewitness account is one data point. But the Tic-Tac encounter, as it became known, was tracked simultaneously by the Princeton's SPY-1 radar system, the FA-8 NATE's onboard radar, and the Advanced Targeting Forward-Look Infrared System. Multiple independent sensing platforms, operated by trained professionals, all tracking the same object, all returning data that produced the same inexplicable result. This is not a story about what someone thought they saw. It is a story about what the instruments recorded. And here's where the pattern becomes harder to rationalize as coincidence. Because you would expect a genuinely anomalous encounter, one involving a misidentified weather phenomenon or an experimental aircraft from another program, to be explicable within a classified framework. If one branch of the government was testing something, and another branch encountered it, the explanation would come through classified channels. That is how compartmentalized programs work. The investigation would quietly produce an answer. The file would close. But these files did not close with answers. They closed with unknowns. Or they were reopened after decades of silence to produce the same conclusion. The Tic-Tac encounter was not explained in 2004. It was not explained when it was declassified in 2017. It was not explained when Commander Fravor testified before the United States Senate in 2023. The object remains unidentified. The Senate testimony matters for a reason that is easy to overlook. Congressional hearings are not opinion forums. They are conducted under oath. The individuals who testified, current and former military officers, intelligence officials, and aerospace professionals, were not telling stories at a conference. They were making formal statements to the legislative branch of the United States government about what they had personally witnessed, what they had personally investigated, and what official records showed. And among those statements was one that reframed the entire conversation. Former intelligence official David Grusch testified that programs exist involving a recovery of non-human technology of unknown origin. He stated this under penalty of perjury. He was not a fringe figure. He had held top-level security clearances. His allegations triggered a formal Inspector General investigation. His credibility was assessed and not dismissed. And the question those statements raised has not been answered. If he is wrong, why has no official body produced the evidence to demonstrate that? And if he is right, even partially, what exactly are the implications of that for everything you have been taught about humanity's place in the technological and historical order? The astrophysicist and computational scientist Dr. Jacques Vallée, who was among the original civilian scientists brought in to consult on Project Blue Book, and who has spent 6 decades studying documented UAP cases, reached a conclusion that he arrived at reluctantly and only after examining thousands of individual reports. He concluded that the phenomenon being observed is real in the sense that it produces physical effects, radar returns, electromagnetic interference, physical traces on the ground, but does not conform to the behavioral patterns of any known technology developed by any known civilization. That is a careful, measured statement from a scientist with extraordinary credentials. It is not a claim about origin. It is a claim about evidence. The evidence is real. The explanation is absent. Step back further, and the pattern extends in a direction the most modern discussions of this subject deliberately avoid. Because the documented observations do not begin in 1947. They do not begin with radar. They do not begin with aircraft. In the Vatican Apostolic Archives, there exist records from the summer of 1561, describing an event over Nuremberg, Germany, in which hundreds of witnesses observed large aerial objects, described in the broadest terms as cylindrical shapes, spheres, and crosses, engaged in apparent conflict above the city. The event was documented in a broadsheet by Hans Glaser, printed at the time and preserved. It is not a legend. It is a contemporary record. In 1566, a similar event was recorded over Basel, Switzerland. In ancient Sanskrit texts, the Vimanaparva section of the Mahabharata contains extended descriptions of aerial craft capable of vertical and horizontal flight. These accounts predate powered aviation by thousands of years. They are not aeronautical speculation. They are detailed records made by people who observed something and tried to describe it in the language available to them. This is not evidence of a single origin. It may not be evidence of anything definitive at all, but it is evidence of a recurring pattern. And the recurring pattern, across cultures that did not communicate with each other, across centuries that did not share a technological vocabulary, across institutional records from military agencies, ancient scribes, medieval city authorities, and modern Senate chambers, is that something has been observed that does not fit the frameworks people have tried to use to explain it. That is where the evidence leaves you, not with an answer, not with a conclusion that resolved cleanly into an accepted category. It leaves you with a catalog of documented, authenticated, officially acknowledged events that span decades of modern record-keeping and thousands of years of human observation. It leaves you with 700 unexplained cases, from Blue Book, 3 declassified Pentagon videos, Senate testimony given under oath, and a pattern of official acknowledgement, followed by official silence that has repeated itself so consistently it has become its own kind of data. Tonight, you will look up at the sky and see the same stars that every generation before you has seen. You will do what they did. You will wonder. The difference is that you are living at the exact moment when the governments of the most technologically advanced civilization in recorded human history have formally acknowledged that something is up there, something they have tracked, documented, investigated, and cannot explain. The same thing your ancestors described, in different languages, across different centuries, under different skies. The question was never whether something was there. The question has always been whether humanity was ever prepared to look at the answer honestly. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more educational content exploring history, science, and ideas, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to Chronomix. Your support helps us continue bringing you thoughtful, well-researched content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.